Hey guys, and welcome back to Awaken Your Inner Healer. I'm your host, Nina, and I will guide you through this podcast episode. Welcome back. And today we are getting deep again and also a little bit dark. No, really, we will be talking about something that we all have, but we tend to shy away from it. It is our own shadow. And the concept of the shadow was first introduced by the psychologist Carl Gustav Jung, who ever heard of it? And we will dive deeper into his concepts today as well. Have you ever felt like there is something deep inside of you that is dark, that is unknown, a different side of yourself? It doesn't seem to be part of you, yet somehow it is. It is there. It is somewhere hidden in the deepest edges of your psyche. The concept of the shadow speaks to the part of ourselves that we tend to avoid, that we deny, or maybe we don't even know that they exist. Also, the shadow is one of the most difficult and can be also intimidating parts of ourselves to face because it holds everything we might dislike or reject about who we are, which is why we often refuse to acknowledge it as part of us. And then it is just easier to push it away. No, you're not part of me, and yet it is still there. So it's kind of a push-pull game we play with our own shadow. And what many don't realize is that when we avoid our own shadow, it can even take a deeper hit on our self-esteem. Paradoxically, confronting our shadow is the only way to gain true mastery over ourselves and also to tap deeper, to gain access to our true selves, or in other words, to our soul. So let's explore how we do that. And before we dive in, if you are new here to this podcast, Awaken Your Inner Healer is all about freeing our body, our mind, and our soul from feelings of stress and anxiety. It is a space for exploration and integration. And with each episode, we peel back layers of the self to uncover deeper truths, to gain deeper insights. And these deeper insights can bring us towards our higher consciousness. Today's episode is packed with insights on shadow work. We talk about the dangers of spiritual bypassing and what happens there. And also how embracing our darkest parts, our darkness, our shadow can lead to our fullest light. We will also look at Carl Jung's concept of the anima and the animus and how they relate to the feminine and the masculine aspects within each of us. We talked about that in a previous episode, and we will dive a little bit deeper in this episode. So if you're ready, grab your tea or your smoothie or your coffee, grab a blanket or bikini if you're on Bali like me. If you're in Germany or Europe where the winter starts, make yourself cozy and let's chase our shadows together. Okay, first things first. Who was Carl Gustav Jung? Because for me, he's a very, very inspiring psychotherapist, a very inspiring person. And maybe he brings some insights for you as well. You can think of him as the cool cousin of Sigmund Freud. Except he is less obsessed with your parents and also childhood trauma. And this means no offense to the Freud fans of you here. Jung was a Swiss psychiatrist and psychoanalyst who founded what we today call analytical psychotherapy. And in his work, he was all about diving deeper into the unconscious mind, the parts of our minds we are not aware of, we are not conscious of. He did not only see the unconscious mind as repressed desires. In fact, he saw it as much more. He saw it as a path to our higher consciousness. Jung took a broader view, which is referring on the existence of higher consciousness. And he was seeing the unconscious as a source of wisdom and also as a source of spiritual potential. In other words, the parts we hide away are not just naughty thoughts of us and repressed thoughts. They are actually providing deeper insights to personal growth. And what made Jung's work so profound was his belief that to achieve wholeness, to come back to our true selves, we need to integrate every part of ourselves, including our darkest aspects, which he calls the shadow. And here we're back again. The shadow, which exists in all of us. And that brings us directly to the question, what actually is the shadow? In simple terms, it is the part of our unconscious mind that contains the things we suppress, we reject, or we feel ashamed of. You can think of it as our psychological basement, where we just throw all the stuff we don't want to see or we don't want to deal with. Kind of like a container for all the unwanted. Can be our fears, our insecurities, our unexpressed desires, and also parts of our personality that we might have judged as unacceptable. So all of the non-glamorous parts of ourselves. And here we can ask ourselves, who is actually the one doing the judgment? And here we mean the judging about what is acceptable or not. Which part of us holds that judgmental quality? And right here we're back again to our ego. It is our ego that judges, that has this quality of judging. And the ego, according to Carl Jung, is a part of our conscious mind that forms our sense of self. So it is in our consciousness, in our conscious awareness. And it is the part that creates who we think we are and how we define ourselves in this physical world as well. Even though we are far more than our ego, right? Our ego craves control, stability, and also a consistent self-image. It holds on to this self-image it creates. It is attached to this image of ourselves. And when we encounter thoughts, feelings, or even impulses in the physical world that don't fit this self-image, which is created by our ego, it pushes them away. No, you're not part of me. You're not part of me. This is not part of me. And where does it push away? It pushes them away into our unconscious mind, into our shadow. This strengthens our shadow. But just because our ego ignores the shadow, it does not mean it disappears completely. It still operates in our unconscious mind. And it might even operate on a more hidden level, even harder to identify it as our part and as our shadow. So while our ego operates in the light of our conscious awareness, our shadow creeps somewhere in the unconscious, hidden from our conscious view. That's one very important distinguishment between ego and shadow. The two are separate but deeply connected. Basically, the ego, we can say, creates our shadow by rejecting parts of ourselves that it cannot accept. And over time, this can lead to a split in our personality. The more we deny our shadow, the stronger it becomes, often showing up in our lives in very unexpected or destructive ways. Can be projective behavior onto others, can be reactive behavior patterns where we are not able anymore to choose our behavior. We're just having this trigger and this reaction. And also it can show up in inner conflicts between different inner parts of us, creating tension and anxiety within our body. According to Carl Jung, the way to our true self and to our soul is through the shadow. The parts of us we push away don't just disappear. They influence our behavior, our emotions, and also decisions from behind the scenes. And to become whole, we need to make the unconscious conscious, being aware, creating awareness. And when we do this, our ego can also relax, it can soften and become more open to all the parts of who we truly are. And Jung said it perfectly in the following quote. He said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." In other words, you can't just meditate your way out of this one, guys. It requires different type of work, of inner work, of shadow work, which we will tap in a little bit later in this podcast. But before we do that, now let's tap into something which I personally can observe a lot and also which confuses me from time to time, especially in spiritual communities. It is a state of spiritual bypassing. Have you ever heard of spiritual bypassing? What is it? To put it simple, it is when we use spirituality as a direct path to avoid facing our shadow, to avoid facing our unresolved emotional issues and also the darkest aspects of ourselves. Have you ever noticed an overfocus on love and light, like, oh, we're all just love and light in these conscious communities? And sometimes it doesn't seem authentic, right? Sometimes if you're a very sensitive person and a very emotionally aware person, you can feel that there's something hidden deeper, and it's not true actually that we're only love and light. We can tend to be in this frequency more and more, but if we go there, go up, 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 up in this frequency without actually looking at our darkest aspects, pushing away the lower frequencies of ourselves, they're still there, they don't just vanish. And this is exactly where spiritual bypassing is happening. And don't get me wrong here, I really love high vibes. I love them. Love and light are so beautiful. But when it is used to avoid the tough stuff, when we are denying our deeper wounds and our darkness, we hit a more superficial layer. Everything stays kind of superficial and it also stays there. It doesn't go deeper. There's no real deep dive and no real deep connection. We get stuck there and then we become superficial and also disconnected from important human parts of ourselves, because in the end, being human means incorporating all emotions and all parts and all aspects of ourselves. Instead of moving deeper in a state of spiritual bypassing, we then move in constant superficial spiritual love and light circles. We're circling and circling and circling and circling without actually being able to move deeper, to move forward. It's like trying to build a house on a very shaky foundation. Without addressing what might be hidden beneath, our relationships, our personal growth, and even our spiritual practices, they will remain shaky as well. To truly grow and heal, we must confront our shadow and also the messy parts within ourselves and within humanity as a whole. And this is what Carl Jung discovered already many, many years ago, and that makes him so super smart. He included the concept of the shadow in his work as a psychotherapist, and also he distinguished between the layer of the personal shadow and the layer of the collective shadow. The personal shadow, you can imagine it as containing everything as an individual, as a person that I push aside, that I push out of myself. This could be childhood wounds, like feeling abandoned when a parent maybe wasn't emotionally available, or being told that we were too much or not enough. And that creates deep carvings within our psyche when we hear that as a child. It can also be personal insecurities, like deep-rooted feelings of inadequacy or fear, the fear of not being loved, for example. Or it might be socially unaccepted personality traits, which can belong to our personal shadow. And that can be feelings of anger and also behavior patterns of expressing anger, feelings of jealousy, or of high sensitivity. These are all behavior patterns that society might label as over emotional, overreactive, or too oversensitive, too weird. They might tell you of keeping it together. And for example, maybe you were taught that showing vulnerability is actually a weakness, so that it feels safer to suppress it. And then it moves into your shadow. And these shadows, these personal shadows, are very, very unique to all of us. They are formed by our own experiences as human beings in this physical reality. And also, to cope with these personal shadows, we learned to protect ourselves. On the other hand, Carl Jung distinguishes in the concept of the collective shadow. And this is a shadow we all share as a society, as a whole. It affects every one of us as well. Even if we don't want to see our personal shadow, we still hold on to a collective shadow as a society. It represents the darker aspects of our cultures, communities, and humanity as a whole. It's a hidden baggage we carry as a collective, which can be things like war, like racism, greed, or even our growing disconnection from nature. These are all reflections of our collective shadow. And when we do not face this shadow, it can show up in harmful behaviors, harmful collective behaviors, which can express themselves in polarization of the society, in discrimination, or in environmental destruction, which we can see more and more around the globe nowadays. And the more we ignore this collective shadow, the bigger the mess becomes, holding us as humanity back from true progress. We can really witness it in how much our earth is bleeding right now. Our nature is bleeding. Our earth is screaming for help. So the collective shadow is quite present and quite big right now. So whether it's personal or collective, here we can see that shadow work is not only about individual healing. It is not egocentric, not just about me. It is about the whole planet, about all humanity, about everybody. And it is also about pushing the frequency so high and on a level so that we as a humanity as a whole gain access to this higher frequency and to our higher consciousness. Now I promised you to also dive a little bit deeper into the aspects of Carl Jung's psychology and also the aspects of his view on our personality structure. It's a very fascinating aspect because already many, many years ago in the last century, he opened up this idea of the anima and the animus. And this way, he opened up the discussions about feminine and masculine energy. In a previous episode, we already explored how every one of us holds both feminine and masculine aspects within ourselves. And Carl Jung expanded on this idea, believing that every man has an inner feminine aspect, which he calls the anima. And he also believes that every woman has a masculine aspect, which he calls the animus. And here it is important again to point out that this is not about gender roles, but rather the balance of these energies within all of us. The anima represents qualities like nurturing, like intuition, creativity, flow, emotional depth. Essentially, it represents the feminine and feeling aspects of our psyche. On the other hand, the animus embodies qualities such as logic, assertiveness, and being active. or taking action, which are traditionally seen as the masculine traits within our society. And Jung believed that part of our individuation process, of the process of becoming whole and finding back to our true self, requires integrating both the anima aspect and the animus aspect. So each man should also integrate his anima, his female aspect. Each woman should also integrate her animus, her masculine aspects, to become whole, to move through their own shadow, and to find back towards the true self. And Carl Jung also included this concept of this feminine and masculine energy, of the anima and the animus, in his work as a psychotherapist, helping his clients to bring these unconscious aspects to the surface through shadow work. Because the anima and the animus often hide in these shadows until we integrate them, especially the anima aspect for the man and the animus aspect for the woman. So this is an integral and important part of shadow work, of balancing these female and male energies within each of us. And for example, Carl Jung observed that a man who suppresses his anima might struggle with emotional expression, or with vulnerability, or with forming deeper connections on a relationship level. And a woman who denies her animus, her male aspects, might find it difficult to assert herself, being strong, setting clear boundaries within the external world, or even making clear decisions for herself, for her own good. And in therapy, Carl Jung guided his patients to actually accept all parts of the psyche and to embrace these hidden aspects, to welcome them back towards the whole personality. What can we actually take away from this today? Embracing both energies within us creates a very harmonious inner world, which then can reflect back in our outer lives. For example, a person who integrates their anima or animus becomes more balanced and more adaptable. A man might find access for deeper emotional expression, while a woman might strengthen her ability to set boundaries more confidently. Ultimately, this balance leads to a richer and also more complete sense of self, allowing us to navigate life with a greater emotional intelligence, with better resilience, and also deeper inner peace. So now we understood that integrating the anima and the animus aspects of our psyche is an integral part of shadow work. But now the other question arises: how do we actually integrate our shadow? What else is there for integrating our shadow? How do we become whole? And we can first say it starts with awareness. Getting aware that there is a shadow and that this shadow might hide in our unconscious mind, that we are not aware of it yet. But this awareness of being unaware is the first step of gaining access towards our shadow. We need to bring the unconscious parts of ourselves into the light of our conscious mind, and this creates this access. And this means also to look out for our triggers, identifying in our external world what might trigger us, maybe in other people's behaviors, or which situations might trigger us. Also identifying where we might have automatic reaction patterns and behavior patterns, and also where we judge, where we maybe judge ourselves, or where we maybe judge other people around us. Because we can say that what frustrates us in other people often reflects something that we have not accepted in ourselves, because every other person which we meet in our lives is a mirror for us, or we can see it as a mirror, as a reflection back at us. So if we get triggered, this other person might point us out towards something which we hold hostile in our shadow within ourselves. So we can choose to see that, and we can choose to listen, and we can choose to dive deeper by identifying our triggers, our judgment, and our automatic behavior patterns. And this is a process of very, very honest self-reflection, of self-compassion, and of patience with myself as well. Also, it is taking a lot of courage to do this deep inner shadow work. To fully understand and integrate our shadow, it can really take years. It's a process. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. Or maybe even longer. Especially, it can take so long because it is so closely linked to our ego, which doesn't want to accept that we have a shadow, which has this consistent self-image that we talked about earlier, that it's hard to change this self-image and to integrate other parts, which might not be as shiny as the ego wants them to be. Working with our shadow is so uncomfortable because it forces us to confront parts of ourselves we have long ignored. But on the other side of this discomfort of looking deeper, of accepting the shadow and integrating it, is inner freedom. If we move through it, we face freedom and we face wholeness within ourselves. So it's probably worth it doing this type of shadow work. And before we close this podcast for today, I want to invite you to reflect on a few questions to help you start exploring your own shadow, just day by day, step by step. And you don't have to answer them all at once. Just take a moment each day, breathe, meditate in silence, and really sit with whatever comes up out of these questions. And the questions can be first connected to your triggers. Can be the question, when was the last time someone really got under your skin? When was the last time someone in your life really triggered you? Maybe it was a friend, maybe it was a colleague, maybe it was your partner or a family member, or maybe even a complete stranger. And here you can ask yourself, what about their behavior irritated me that much? Could that be a reflection of myself? Could that lead me to something that I haven't fully accepted in myself? Because it's often easier to spot this behavior or these personality traits in others than in ourselves. Then next, you can also think about the qualities you have been taught by your surroundings, by maybe your parents, friends, society as a whole, which are supposed to be bad or unacceptable, and which you also now judge as bad or unacceptable. For example, were you ever told to be quiet, to be nice, or to be not that emotional? We are often conditioned to suppress parts of our true selves to fit into society's expectation or also our family's expectations, how they want us to be. And then we lose touch to our true selves. So which parts of yourself are you actually judging as not acceptable or as bad? Could be another question to sit with, to meditate on it. And finally, you can also have a closer look on your emotional reactions. In which social interactions or situations in your life are you reacting emotionally? And maybe even overreacting emotionally. These can be situations where you don't seem to have control over your emotional state, but not only the state within yourself, but also the reaction you bring out into the world. And maybe these reactions are bigger than the situation itself is, kind of making an elephant out of a fly, we say in German. Maybe it was just a small comment by somebody that made you feel disproportionately angry, hurt, or criticized. And this can lead you maybe to deeper wounds, to older wounds, to some traumas that might still be stored in your body. And that might be worth looking at it a little bit deeper. You can pause here and ask yourself, wait a moment, what is really happening here? Why am I reacting like this? Is this the most benefiting reaction in this situation? Is this a reaction my highest self would choose? These are all questions that can bring you closer in contact with your higher self, but also with your shadow aspects. And apart from all these questions, which you can ask yourself, there's also practices which you can incorporate into your daily routine, into your daily life, which might help you over time to come deeper into your shadow aspects and deeper into yourself. One powerful practice, and you probably heard of it before, is journaling. But the journaling I mean here is a very creative and free flow type of journaling. It's just taking a quiet moment, maybe asking a question, pausing, maybe even write this question down you have for your journal prompt today. Whatever comes up, sitting, breathing deeply, taking deep belly breaths and full long exhales, and sitting with the question and see whatever comes up in this moment as an answer, and you write it down. Write it down without being in your mind, without thinking about it too much, just letting it flow in a very free and creative way. And here it is super important that we write and we journal without any judgment, with a disconnection from our ego. Afterwards, we can put our journal aside and we can take it maybe a few days after, look at our answers, at what we've written down. And these prompts in our journey might be hints that point us out to our shadow aspects, to our hidden aspects of the psyche. Another good practice, which I personally love a lot, is eye gazing, but not with another person. It's eye gazing with myself in front of the mirror. And you can do that for 10 minutes, for 15 minutes. Also here, you take these deep breaths again and bringing yourself into a state of meditation. Kind of, it is for me emptying myself out, bringing myself out of my mind, out of my ego, and with this state, looking into my eyes in front of the mirror. And then I start eye gazing with myself. And when you do that, you can also tell yourself, I invite every part of me in. I invite every part of me to be part of me. I invite every part of me to speak, to tell its truth. And you can even say to yourself by looking deep into your eyes, I see you, I hear you, I value you, I honor you, and I thank you for being here and for pointing me the way towards my higher self. Thank you, shadow. And this way you can embrace your shadow and you can encourage it to show up and to speak up maybe. And this way, when it comes into your conscious mind, from the unconscious to your conscious mind, you have the power to work with it actively, to integrate it. And one last practice is staying present with all the judgments and with the projections you hold in your everyday life. And every time when you identify that you judge yourself or somebody, or that you are pushed into projective behaviors, like which you can identify in being overly emotional, for example. Taking this step of not reacting, of kind of catching yourself in the process of projection or in the process of judging. And here the true power lies in pausing this automatic reaction. It's like a button, like a pause button you can push, where you say, okay, I see that I judged myself here. I see that I judged this other person here, and I choose not to. I choose to hit pause, and I choose to break this pattern of judgment and of projection. And then when you do this, not moving into this automatic behavior, take a few deep breaths here as well. So we work actively with the breath. You see, the breath is a vital part in shadow work and in pausing, because this pause allows you to stop and to reflect and to bring the shadow from the unconscious to the conscious again. And then also here we can identify it, catch it, and talk to it directly. We can talk to it as if it is a part of ourself, and even ask our shadow direct questions. And if you need help with that, I am trained to guide you through this process of shadow work, of identifying your different inner parts, how they might be in conflict with each other, and how we can bring them back in harmony, into a harmonious state where they also communicate with each other in an aligned manner. Feel free to contact me for this type of shadow work if you need help with this. You're not in this alone. So that was a lot of content, guys, and we want to keep it at this level for today. I hope you could take something interesting out of this concept of the shadow and of Carl Jung's work on the archetypes of the anima and the animus, and how shadow work also include to integrate our feminine and masculine aspects in ourselves. We also have explored how the shadow shapes our psyche. We looked at the dangers of spiritual bypassing, and also how embracing our darkness is the key to living a more authentic and balanced life. I hope it got a little bit more clear that shadow work isn't about judging parts of us. It is actually about integration. And integration means embracing every part of ourselves so that we can experience wholeness in the end, so that we can experience humanness as a whole. I hope today's episode sparks some new insights, and I encourage you to explore the questions and practices we discussed in the end of this podcast. Take it slow and be kind to yourself along the way. And if you have any deeper insights along this process of your own shadow work, always feel free to text me, to write a message to me. I'm really happy to explore your journey deeper with you. And also if you have some more insights, some more hidden truths you unveiled here. If this episode resonated with you, or if you're also curious about exploring your own shadow, be sure to follow this podcast, Awaken Your Inner Healer, on Spotify. Or also I have the channel on YouTube, Holistic Embodied Healing. I will link everything in the show notes. It would mean the world to me if you share this knowledge, if you share this truth, if you share this podcast and this content with your friends, family, or whoever might need it. And you can also reach out to me anytime on social media, for example, Instagram at Holistic Embodied Healing. So happy to connect with you. All links are in the show notes. And if you want to book a personal coaching with me, or want to explore more aspects of your psyche and of your individual way, text me. I'm here anytime and I'm really happy to help. Bye, guys. Until next time. And keep in mind, the path to your true light isn't just about being open for the light. It's by integrating your shadow and your darkest parts, by embracing them, by welcoming them. Thanks for tuning in today, and see you in the next episode. Much love and namaste. Your Nina. Thanks for listening.